Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Tim McGuinness. I'm the Managing Director of the Society of Citizens Against Relationship Scams. We are a government-registered crime victims assistance and crime prevention nonprofit organization based in Miami, Florida, USA, with offices in Monterrey, Mexico, Monterrey, Nuevo Leon, Mexico. Uh, Joining me today is Debby Montgomery Johnson, another co-director of SCARS, and our guest, Kathryn Hathaway. Welcome, Kathryn. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm an attorney. I'm based in North Florida. I'm board certified in consumer bankruptcy, and I have been delivering people from the mess that they sometimes create. Nobody has ever done it on purpose. Things happen, and bankruptcy is the release mechanism that was created for all healthy financial societies. The Code of Hammurabi has it, the Bible has it, Deuteronomy chapter 15. It's in our US Constitution that there shall be bankruptcy courts established. It's in Article 1. It's a tool, as President Trump said. But it's a useful tool, and especially for people who have been scammed.
Mm-hmm.
And I have filed many bankruptcies for people on all levels of having been scammed, because it was the best tool for them.
Excellent, thank you. If anyone who's seeing this is interested in having a consultation about personal bankruptcy, are you able to practice outside of the state of Florida or just within?
Just within Florida.
Okay. But nevertheless, the information that we'll be talking about is universal throughout the United States, since bankruptcy is a federal regulated process, correct?
For the most part, yes. Exemptions are different in every state. Each state values different things because of their financial society. Like Puerto Rico, you can keep a cow and a sheep or two sheep, and that's exempt from claims of creditors, but $300 on a house or something. I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's very different from Florida, where we have exempt homesteads,
right,
but not much in the way of cash. So that's different in every state. So bankruptcy planning would be different in every state, but the federal laws, yeah.
All right, so there's two basic victim scenarios that we'd like to explore how bankruptcy can be used as a tool to help mitigate financial losses and debts associated with them. Now, the first scenario is a typical financial fraud victim who was groomed substantially and professionally, expertly manipulated and controlled by the criminals for the purpose of harvesting the victim's money or other assets. Many of these will drain their 401ks, retirement accounts. Many will take out second mortgages and additional loans. And then when the scam ends, a big part of the trauma that affects their resiliency is not just the trauma associated with the emotions of discovery of a fake, deceptive relationship, but also the realization of the consequences that come with the financial impact. Typically, what we see for most scam victims is a timeline that goes out about 2 years in terms of reasonable recovery. At about the 6-month point is where they've progressed through the grief cycle to the point where they sort of reach a crisis point. But typically we see that most victims are able to successfully stall the effects of their debts for about a year and a half. That's the point where the elastic is no longer stretchable for most victims. It varies. I'm generalizing, of course. Some of them, it's going to be catastrophic very quickly. We had a victim a few years back whose name was Boyati Miskun, an Indonesian living in Hong Kong, who committed suicide over the financial aspects of these crimes because the criminals had such control of her that she went out onto the street and obtained sizable loans from less than legal borrowing authorities. In other words, loan sharks. Hong Kong, Chinese, Tong kind of loan sharks. And within about 5 months of the end of her scam, she took her life because of the fear and the challenges associated with that. There was no way out for her. But many victims feel very, very similarly. We lose on average 15 to 20 victims a day to suicide. And that's just in the United States. So a lot of people are at the end of their ropes relatively quickly, and that second crisis point can be, in many respects, the most difficult because they've managed to get through the psychological elements of recovery. We strongly recommend to everyone that they see a trauma counselor or therapist. We also recommend that they see an attorney, depending upon their circumstances, because scams come with a variety of legal complications. For the average victim, not so much. They might, however, be in problems with state banking regs. They may have lied, so they may have committed wire fraud. They may have violated state money laundering laws or federal money laundering laws. But generally speaking, they're not going to be prosecuted for those if they are just a victim. Then there's another scenario where they are a victim, but the criminals extract all the money that the victim has, and then the criminals convert that person into a money mule to receive money and receive money from other victims and then transmit it to the criminals. This happens in anything from about 5 to 10% of the cases. In the United States, there were about 400 money mules prosecuted in 2020, about 4,000 in Europe, but that number is escalating. So we'd like to go through these scenarios and the ways in which you or another professional bankruptcy attorney, certified bankruptcy attorney, can help victims similarly in other states. So let's talk about the basic. One of the things that most victims do is they will borrow money. Now, in many cases, it's borrowed under false pretenses, but that's a function of the manipulation and the control that the victim is under. In the case of bankruptcy, can you explain the difference between personal bankruptcy Chapter 7 and personal bankruptcy Chapter 13, is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Chapter 7 is a liquidation bankruptcy. It's where you say to the court, here's my income, here's my expenses. I can't afford to pay these people. Please take my debt and make it go away. Chapter 13 is a bankruptcy where you say to the court, here's my income, here's my expenses. I've got some money left over at the end of the month after reasonable and necessary living expenses. But it's not enough to pay all these people. let me give what I have left over every month to a Chapter 13 trustee who will use that money to pay my creditors pennies on the dollar. And at the end of 5 years, let the debt be dissolved, or discharged is the term of art. In Chapter 13, there are other things that I have helped victims of this kind of relationship scam do. I had a gentleman, lovely old man. He was just my favorite person. But he had given all of his income and fallen behind on his mortgage. And so we filed a Chapter 13 bankruptcy where you take the arrearage on the mortgage and your leftover income goes to the trustee who pays the mortgage company to catch up the mortgage. And that was how we used bankruptcy to help him. Unfortunately, he was still very much connected to his handler. What's the right word for that? His criminal. And his criminal kept bilking him. And it was very sad. I wish he had known about a group like this, and I wish that he could have sought help there. Now that I know about you, I get these people every year. I do a couple or 3 bankruptcies for victims of this kind of fraud, and I will definitely alert them to your organization.
Thank you.
Kathryn, in the case of your older gentleman, did he have any family members that were nearby that were involved or not involved?
His children were involved and had tried to take control of his bank account so that he couldn't dig in once they found out what was going on. They tried very hard to prevent him from taking his money and sending it to his friend Frank. But
did they work with you? Could they work with you?
Oh, they did. He gave permission for me to talk to his daughters. And, we worked together. The credit union alerted me and them when they saw funky behavior in his bank account. I mean, we worked as a team to try to get him back on his feet.
But he was still talking to the criminals. So
yeah.
The reality is he hadn't accepted the fact that he was even a victim.
No, it was a real relationship. To him, it was totally a real relationship.
Right. Unfortunately, that's the kind of victim. If you kind of put it into alcoholic terminology, right? You can't go to an AA meeting with a bottle of gin in your pocket. It just doesn't work.
No.
So you have to be abstinent before any form of recovery will work. It's, as AA says, you have to ask for help.
Amen.
In our particular case, one of our rule sets is we can't help you. In fact, we're quite upfront about it. We can't help you if you're still talking to your criminals. We have 3 basic steps that we require everybody to go through before they can really embark on the road of recovery. One of them is stop all communications with the criminals. The second one is you got to report it to the police, local police. And the reason is that is the first step of a victim acknowledging to themselves that they're a victim of crime, and 2, doing their duty to themselves and the rest of the world by reporting that crime. Plus, they need that report number for everything that will follow, potentially even including a bankruptcy. If they were a victim of a crime, you probably want to have the police report as a part of this. Now, I have a question for you. Once a person files their bankruptcy, what does that do to the creditors knocking on the door?
It prevents them from taking any further collection efforts. There are safety valves in bankruptcy for creditors, and they can appeal. They have a limited 60-day period, 60 to 90-day period, in which they can ask the bankruptcy court not to discharge that debt because the creditor was defrauded by the victim. in order to get that money. Like
How often does that happen?
I've never seen it, but it's possible.
Okay. So would you say that one of the most important things that a victim can do when they're considering bankruptcy is not only talk to a certified bankruptcy attorney, but be completely, absolutely honest about every aspect?
Yes, yes. And yes, because there's a lot more that plays into filing a bankruptcy for someone than what are your debts? What are your assets? What have your financial transactions over the last 2 to 4 years, depending on state law? What have those financial transactions been? Because things can come back to bite you that you don't understand. You're not going to find in your Google search. I never recommend that people file their own bankruptcies without talking with an experienced professional.
Can I ask a question? How are people coming to you? Because after this reveal of the scam, I was able to make the money work, but there were people telling me file bankruptcy. I wouldn't have done that, but I wouldn't have even known how to proceed. Does the bank encourage you to go, or?
I get referrals from banks occasionally, but that's occasionally, like, very small. Well, I've been here for 35 years. I have a reputation. All the lawyers in town know me. Well, I say all, but maybe not all, but I get referrals from other lawyers, from mental health counselors.
Okay, that's my question. Where are they?
I do get mental health counselors, and people just Google on the internet and they like my website, or they like my Google reviews, or
I just feel that maybe victims would be a little bit reticent to reaching out that way. I know when I heard bankruptcy, no, won't do that. Even though it's a good tool, and if I had understood the mechanics of it and why it might have been proper, I think we have to get past the skepticism of don't do that.
And I would never have recommended it for you because you had a company.
Right. Right.
That was not the avenue for you.
No, but most of our survivors don't have companies. They are 60 years old, 65 years old. They're in retirement, but they've lost everything. They feel like they don't have enough time to catch up, even though a lot of our family members are living to their 90s. So I got a third of my lifetime to go. But they just feel that there's no hope, that there's no way that they can move forward. And they're scared. They're scared of the creditors. They're scared of the banks. They're scared of law enforcement. They're scared of all these things, but you take the fear out of it.
Yes, that's part of my job.
So let's talk about that first point of contact, if we can. So someone calls you on the phone, and obviously they make an appointment, they come in. Do you provide them with an initial consultation to determine whether or not they're
Yes.
a suitable candidate for bankruptcy?
I have them fill out a financial questionnaire before they come in, and we sit and look at their budget, their assets, their debts, and where they came from. And, I want to hear their story, because they're not just,
Right.
a bunch of numbers to me. They're real people. And I get more tears at my table about money problems than any other kind of law I've ever done. Criminal, probate, divorce, no tears.
Do you
Not
also
like
practice criminal? Are you certified to do criminal law?
No, I'm not, and I don't do that anymore. Throughout my practice, I've done, I started out, opened my doors, and whatever people would pay me to do, I would do.
Okay.
And I started eliminating things I didn't like. So I'm down to bankruptcy, estate planning, and probate, which I enjoy. And that's what I do now.
So question. Obviously, there are alternatives to bankruptcy. There's various kinds of credit counseling, etc. Could you give us some idea of where one works or doesn't work for individuals? What would be the criteria for someone going to credit counseling versus going into, say, rescheduling their debt under Chapter 13?
Well, we look at how many non-exempt assets they have. How much money are they going to have to pay into a Chapter 13? And sometimes it's more than they can afford to do. Or sometimes they have, they're about to inherit money, and that inheritance would go to the creditors. So they don't want to do that. So we find other ways of managing. I make recommendations about what they could liquidate to pay their creditors, because bankruptcy isn't an answer for everybody.
Right.
I don't recommend they go into credit counseling without having had a bankruptcy consultation first, because what I want for my clients is the fastest recovery financially possible. And if someone were to file Chapter 7, within 2 years, FHA regulations let them get a mortgage and buy a house again. In your recovery process starts immediately upon entry of a discharge. So discharge in Chapter 7 is entered 90 to 100 days after the bankruptcy is filed.
Mm-hmm.
And you immediately get a secured credit card, start using it and paying it off every month. Never charge it up over 30%, and keep it lower if you can, but use it for like groceries and gas. Right. And just proving your credit worthiness again. And credit scores, if they have been down in the 400 to 500s, I don't think I've ever seen a 400 actually, but in the 500s, low 6s, they may go up 100 points within a year after filing bankruptcy. So bankruptcy is a good tool to getting back on your feet as quickly as possible.
Question on that credit report, because I talk to a lot of people, and like me, we've had excellent credit. So after the scam, if they go into bankruptcy and it's Chapter 7, gets discharged, where does the credit score go?
If their credit score when they file bankruptcy is high, it tanks. If their credit score is low 500s or low 6s when they file, usually it will go up right after bankruptcy, right after a discharge. It depends on where you are when you file.
I guess that would have scared me, because I'm so conscious of my credit.
Of course, it scares a lot of people, but most people who come to me say, my credit score is already toast. And the financial report that we buy for our clients is a tri-merge, tells what your score is now and what, according to their algorithm, your score will be 12 months after your discharge. And according to those reports, if it's low now, it's going to be up as much as 130 points I've seen. And my clients come back and tell me what's happened to their credit score.
Questions. One scenario that we see with victims of online financial fraud is the bank becomes aware without the victim notifying them that fraud is taking place.
They do.
In a lot of different ways, because the victim tried to deposit a big cashier's check, withdrew the money because they had a good account relationship with the bank, and then all of a sudden there's a $20,000 overdraft in their account. Many banks will close the account, and that person will then be banned from having a bank account.
Yeah, check system.
Bankruptcy helps solve that problem to restore their ability to have financial accounts in the future?
No, I don't think so.
Permanent ban.
It's unless you make good on that bad check or that overdraft of your account, you stay in the check systems register. And
is there a time frame for that? I'm out of banking for a long time. I don't remember.
I don't know.
No,
I don't know. Clients have to find other ways.
It's fairly short term. I mean, they're going to be all over you the minute it bounces, and it'll go to collection, or at least somebody in the bank is going to call you within a week or two.
Right. The discovery of it is long, but the effect with being registered with check systems, I don't think there's a statute of limitations on that like there is on a credit report. I could be wrong.
I'm curious because I don't know if it's just the big banks or all banks, like community banks, are they all check systems?
They all
do now.
Register. I've never seen an overdraft that wasn't registered with check
Including
systems.
the payday loan people report into that as well.
Do they?
Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, they're just nasty people.
Yes.
Excuse me. I'm sure.
And a lot of our victims will go and get payday loans believing that they're going to get paid back because the criminals said so. Now,
Yep.
another question. In this particular kind of crime, they've sent money off and there are options for recovery of the money. Sometimes it's like finding a unicorn. Debby, for example, nearly 9 years after the end of her crime, got money back through a Federal Trade Commission recovery program.
A little bit.
Well,
A little bit.
I didn't say you got all of it. I said you got money back.
Yeah, no, it was a Western Union settlement,
Right.
and I get 10,000 back. So,
But the point that I'm making is,
yep, I know.
if you'd have gone through bankruptcy and then at some point in the future you recovered money that you claimed was lost, what's the implication in that situation? Can a creditor go back and request the reopening of the bankruptcy?
Yes, they can. If you had a lawsuit or a claim against someone when you filed the bankruptcy, that's an asset. And bankruptcy trustees are reopening. We had a class action suit in Tallahassee where there was a sick building, huge building. State employees worked there. Their health got bad and they lost their jobs or they quit because they couldn't survive the sick building. And then when they figured out it was a sick building, there was a big class action suit, and many bankruptcies were reopened to claim the funds that came from the class action suit and distribute those assets among the debtors' creditors.
Is there a time limit for how long after discharge can a trustee reopen?
No, there's no time limit.
Okay.
I think
Talk about
some of these cases were more than 10 years old.
Wow.
Yes. So we've got a pending situation with both Western Union and MoneyGram, where the Federal Trade Commission went into settlements because they weren't doing a good enough job of protecting the consumers. In the case of Western Union, the FTC fined them for $450 million. In the case of MoneyGram, it's about $150 million. MoneyGram money has not yet been paid to anybody. Western Union money, they paid about 2/3 out and still a third remains to be paid out. Another question. So many victims drain their retirement accounts, 401ks. So they've basically drained every financial asset that they've got. Now they're confronted with a massive tax bill. Interest, penalties.
Yeah.
What does bankruptcy have the ability to do in those situations?
Well, older taxes that have been, the returns were filed, and then the taxes are more than 3 years old. The returns have been filed for more than 2 years, and and assessed for more than 240 days can be discharged in bankruptcy, so long they can be discharged in bankruptcy. The problem comes up if the victim did not file a return or didn't file a truthful return.
Right.
That's like they lost some of their negotiating.
Or if tax court created a judgment?
A lien, yes, that's what I was going to say. The best thing to do with taxes is meet them head on and enter into a payment arrangement with the IRS as soon as possible, because the time continues to run on that 3 years, except for the period where you're in negotiation with the payment arrangement, so that the time continues to run. And when the taxes are more than 3 years old and there's no tax lien, they don't have to go to tax court to do a lien. They just decide you're not responding to them and they want a lien, and they record it in the public records. And once they've done that, they have a lien on your house. They have a lien on all of the stuff that you own. And I have managed to, using Chapter 13, deal with tax liens and then get the lien part taken care of and discharge the rest of the taxes because they're old. But it becomes very tricky. So agree with thine adversary quickly, not to be religious or anything, but that was just plain good advice. You know, if the IRS is after you, meet them face to face, use a good tax attorney or enrolled agent, and get some kind of payment arrangement going, because that will help you in the future.
If you have a home in Florida, because we're talking Florida here, is it exempt from bankruptcy?
It's exempt from claims of creditors.
So if
So
it's paid off and you don't have a mortgage, then you can stay there.
you can stay there and you can keep your home and discharge all of your debt.
Okay.
Without it touching your home. So I'm not a fan. I tell people never give away what no one can take away.
But don't sell your house to pay these bills.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Because the state of Florida's policy is we want our people to have a place to live and not be on the dole. So back in the 1868 Constitution, I guess, they started protecting homesteads.
Okay. But if you did have a mortgage, then the bank could come after you.
Right. If you don't pay your mortgage, you've got problems, some of which we can solve in bankruptcy using a Chapter 13. It's a very powerful tool.
Okay. Okay. Because I know people get afraid of being put out of their houses.
Right.
Next,
But I don't want anybody taking a mortgage out to pay these bills either, because that's giving away what none of them could have taken away.
right. So now let's flip over to the other victimology, the other victim scenario, which is normal victim. They went through the same stuff, more or less. Everybody's story is a little bit different. And by the way, can you hear me well, Debbie?
Yes.
Okay, good. So, but they then become a mule. They're an unwitting accomplice. They're buying in, for example, the gentleman that you talked to. Odds are extraordinarily high that because he's not stopped communication and he's in total denial about the fact that it is a crime, he's probably aiding the criminals under some scenario or storyline that they fed him. And this happens in a variety of ways. The victim will give them access to their banking accounts or financial accounts, credit cards or checking account, allowing the criminals to put money in and withdraw money. In other words, they give out that routing and account number to other victims to send wire transfers in. And then they withdraw it through a wire transfer out. Or one of the other clever mechanisms is they'll receive money into the account and then they'll use a debit card on the account, which they've had issued to themselves, to another accomplice nearby, and they'll buy physical assets like cars, etc., and ship them to West Africa. Or they'll buy cryptocurrency out of that account. So the victim has committed a more substantial crime by giving a total stranger access to their financial accounts, bank fraud in effect, and money laundering in the process. Now, that's one issue. But the hard part of this is that victims sent money to that other victim. That means that other distant victim can litigate, because the only person they know is the person who received the money in their own state or their own country, who is accessible through litigation. Now, then you have that scenario where there may be pending lawsuits. There may not be judgments yet, but they're not going to be far in the future, because it could even be done through small claims to get a judgment. What would you recommend that victims do if they were in fact a money mule? How can they use potentially bankruptcy to eliminate the potential of future judgments against them as a shield?
Well, first of all, they would have to be able to name all their creditors. They'd have to give them notice of their bankruptcy. Those creditors have only a 60-day window in which to file a petition to avoid discharge of this debt.
Right.
And in that 60 days, they have to file a complaint. If they don't, they're discharged forever. But if you don't have an address for that person that was your co-victim, if you don't know where they are or how to notify them of the bankruptcy, that debt doesn't get discharged. If they do file a complaint to avoid discharge, debts incurred as part of a crime or fraud are not dischargeable. But they have to bring it to the attention of the bankruptcy court. If someone has been scammed by another person, a good thing to do would be to call the United States Department of Justice and say, I've heard this person's filed a bankruptcy and they made me send them lots of money. And let the US Department of Justice take care of it.
So again, don't do any of this on your own.
So
Oh, God, no.
Yeah.
the scenario then is, if you're a victim and you became a money mule, it's a much more serious situation that bankruptcy may not resolve completely.
May not discharge the debt. Those debts can be accepted from discharge if some kind of a lawsuit or claim was filed in that 60-day window.
And the origin victim who's sending the money to the victim potentially in the middle, they've got the bank account and routing numbers, so it's not complex to track them down.
Right.
Ironically, the victim in the middle also has the receiving information from the person who sent the money to begin with. So theoretically, there's a transaction there that can be traced back to someone else's account as well.
Well, what's important here is pay attention to your bank accounts. I mean, I had that woman here local that was, ignorance is not innocence here. She came to me and I was reviewing her bank account, and there was a check came in from the state of Arizona. It was a benefits check made out to some other woman, went into this woman's account because her scammer says it's coming in. What's that?
She was a mule, and
she was the mule. Yeah,
and using her accounts.
They used her accounts. We saw where the check came from. It said the state of Arizona. She was instructed to go, when that money went in, they instructed her, now go take it out, all but maybe $600, go buy Bitcoin. And they showed her how to do it and send it to us. So now she's received that money erroneously, took it out, mailed it out. It's not in her bank account. And the state of Arizona is going to want to come back and get that check. So she's in deep, deep doo-doo.
There's a related aspect to this, which is if a person unwittingly becomes a money mule and they've given access to their financial accounts, money comes into their account. It's not a joint account. The criminal's name isn't on the account.
Mm-mm.
They've gained access to it and control of it to a certain extent. So let's say this victim's received $100,000 flowing through that account. Technically, that's income. And they have tax liability for that income, possibly at the state, possibly at the federal level, right?
Yeah. Oh, what fun.
It gets you, it could
Exactly.
get you kicked off of the government assistance if you're on welfare or food stamps or something like that.
Yes.
It's a huge deal.
So if they were to go into bankruptcy, obviously they have to declare their income.
They do.
But illicit money flow through their account becomes part of their aggregated income. And people are going to wonder, where are these assets?
Yeah. I have not had a case like that at that level, or at least not to my knowledge. I haven't had a case like that. I don't think they turned, my little old man was the one deepest into this mess.
And he may very well have done that, because when we see that victim profile of someone who cannot turn it off, they are very often being used as a resource for money laundering.
I did not see the money, because I review at least 6 months of bank statements, if not a year, before we file. And I did not see that pattern in there, because when I see big things come in and go out, I ask questions.
Right. What often happens is the criminals will ask the person to open a new account to which they will have access, and often the victims won't disclose this.
Yeah, I don't think I have the ability to, unless I see transfers. Sometimes they'll transfer money into the other account and I go, wait a minute, what is this account? I don't have records of that account. And then I make them bring me those.
These are people that obviously have not gone to a bankruptcy attorney yet.
So we had a victim call us, and we don't accept phone calls for a variety of reasons, but we had a victim call us, and we were going through the onboarding process of bringing her into one of our support groups, and we imposed the normal requirements. You got to cut off all communications, you got to report it to the police, and then you're ready to join our support group. It's like you have to abstain from alcohol or drugs before you can go into those programs, right? She ended up filling out a false police report. She characterized the crime completely differently. She said it was a purchase scam, as opposed to the fact that she was a relationship scam victim who had shared her accounts with the criminals. That's a big no-no for us, because this is a trust relationship at every level. But the point being is victims are often ashamed and feel guilty about disclosing the truth. And hard truth, difficult truth, there's nothing but the truth. So those are some of the things that we see, and we do recommend virtually every contact we have with victims. We tell them, we're not a mental health care provider, that we are not licensed attorneys, we're not licensed financial professionals. The opinions that I or Debbie say are strictly those of the person involved, and this is nothing but a conversation between people. Don't listen to anything we say relative to making healthcare decisions, legal decisions, financial decisions. See a professional provider. But often we're asked about what is bankruptcy really like and how can it help them, because every victim who's lost money usually loses a substantial amount. It could be you know, it could be $1,000, but to them, it was the equivalent of $1 million. Or Debby, you know, $1.1 million loss, and everything in between. And it becomes one of the real challenges. In your experience as a bankruptcy attorney, I can speak from personal experience, having gone through this process myself because of a company failure. But do you find that when someone embraces the process of bankruptcy, whether it's 7 or 13 or whatever the equivalent is in Canada or Great Britain or wherever it is, do you find that that has a cathartic effect, a therapeutic effect on the person? Can
I
you?
don't know whether I can say therapeutic, but I can say I feel so much better having talked to someone about this
Right.
and taking, you know, explaining the process, and that they feel so much relief. People with chronic health problems, you know, relief and not worrying is a great health improver for some folks. I think bankruptcy has saved a couple marriages, probably more than a couple, because I filed thousands of bankruptcies over the year. But taking that financial stressor and worry away is therapeutic, if I can use that word as a non-professional.
Sounds good to me.
Control, it's control also. It's giving them a little bit of control over what they feel they've completely lost control over.
A
Right.
lot of control.
Yeah.
Where they have been mules, I have never had knowingly had that kind of bankruptcy, and I'm real concerned that it may not be possible for them to discharge their debt. That I'm not a criminal lawyer, and there are criminal aspects of that that I couldn't even begin to address. And what you revealed to me there about that is just terrifying.
And it's happening more often. That's what we're trying to get the word out more about the mules, because so many victims are out of money. They'll completely run out of money, but they're still emotionally attached. And that's the way that the scammers, the criminals, can keep you in the game, because now you're helping them, and you want to help them because they're
Minimizing word. It's not a game. Keep you
I know. I know.
under control.
It's not a game, but you see what I mean? You're still involved in the event, because they become family, they become friends. The older gentleman, you said it, it's his friend Frank, or whatever the guy's name was. Until you recognize that the fraud has happened, you'll push everybody else away.
Yep.
And keep them a secret. Yeah.
You'll keep them a secret. You will not tell. And so you got to acknowledge what's happening. And if anybody could, I wish that they would see their scammer like I did, you know, have them confess, see them, because that for me was that brick wall. Boom, Deb, stop. I don't know. I don't know when it would have ended for me. I mean, sort of completely running out of money, but I did have my company. But it's a tough situation.
So think about one of our board members, Vismaya. So
he knows, you know, Vismaya.
I do. In excess of 30 times.
Her stepdad.
Her stepdad. He gave away virtually every cent he had. He remortgaged his home, lost his car, lost every asset he had to move in with Vismaya in a rental. She was caring for him because virtually every cent he was getting in Social Security and benefits were going to the criminals as well. And we don't know if he was turned into a mule or not. We don't think so, because he was so willing to part with everything that he had.
She took control of some things, but she didn't want to completely take over. So she kept giving him a little bit of money.
Right.
And that little bit of money, poof.
Because
he was a generous old man.
He was incapable of stopping it.
Yeah.
Or it would stop naturally when he ran out of money. And accumulate a little bit, and then would come the next one.
They'd wait for them.
They do sell their lists. This is organized on a level that most people have no idea about. And the magnitude is, in the United States alone in 2020, there were 30 million online financial fraud victims. 30 million. 10% of the US population in 1 year.
That's amazing.
They weren't all relationships. That was about 2 million. So relationship scams are running at a little less than 1%. But this has all happened in the last 2.5 years. Prior to that, we had driven it down to below 500,000 victims worldwide. And in 2020, with the change in legal focus in the United States, because the US drives the world on this, we saw 5 million victims out of nowhere in Brazil, and we saw as many as 25 million victims in just 1 year worldwide. Partly it was the contribution of the change in modality that came out of China in 2020. Not only did we get the present of the coronavirus, we also got something called a pig butchering scam. Wonderful term. Which is a combination of a relationship to establish trust, manipulation, and control. Then it turns into a quick investment opportunity. And it's so professional that they have their own apps and websites, and the victim puts in a little bit of money, and they actually see a return, and the scammers even pay the profit back. Then the victim is asked to put in everything, because chasing the money sets into place.
Is that like the Ponzi scam, One Global, that's going on in the bankruptcy courts?
No. A Ponzi is where the criminals will, it generally is an investment scam, but it can be many different kinds. It can be done in real estate. Some might say that certain multi-level marketing schemes are Ponzi's, but
some won't say that.
Well, it depends upon the organization. Some are more, some are not at all. But a good example of that is Madoff, right? He was receiving investments.
Yes.
And he was living high in the hog, and he constantly have a flow of new investments. But as the new investments came in, he was using that to pay back the previous, or the interest profit to the previous investors. But eventually it reaches its peak, and the inflow of money isn't equal to what he owes the investors. And the whole thing blows up. That is a form of fraud, but a different kind of fraud. No, this is very simple, where the victims invest their money in cryptocurrency usually, and the minute that they invest the big amount, the whole thing switches off. The scammers are unreachable, the app stops working, the website is gone, and they're just left wondering what the hell happened.
It's happening to a lot of millennials.
But that raises a really good question that maybe you can give us an insight on. What happens in the case of cryptocurrency holdings in a bankruptcy?
Yeah.
Well, they're an asset, and
What
theoretically, if they're not disclosed, the debtor has committed fraud, bankruptcy fraud, which is a federal crime. And I'm not savvy enough to know how they would catch them. But the trustees in bankruptcy tell me that there is always a little birdie, somebody out there who knows this person who's filed a bankruptcy and just can't stand to see them get away with something. And they call the trustees, and they get these phone calls all the time. So if anybody knows that you've got cryptocurrency and they know that you filed a bankruptcy, the chances are very good that somebody's going to tell. And then that's bankruptcy fraud. And I don't know how they resolve
Life
that
just gets
problem.
worse.
Oh, much worse, much worse.
So the confusing element of this is that a victim gave money to the criminals in the guise of an investment. On paper, it looks like they've got a bunch of cryptocurrency in a wallet or an account someplace. Of course, they don't have access to it. Now, confounding this is another problem, and this is why we require that all victims report these crimes to their local police. The reality is only about 1% of victims report these crimes.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
Which is why it's as bad as it is. Because our friends at the FBI and the Federal Trade Commission, they freely admit all they can say is talk about the reports they've actually received. They can't extrapolate. They can't estimate the way we're free to do. So the FBI says, okay, we got 400 and some thousand reports. Well, the reality is it's probably 40 million reports if everybody reported. So if a person has a paper asset which is identifiable, but they don't report the crime, then there's nothing to negate or offset that paper asset, right?
Yeah, I've had people list stock that they bought that they were never able to sell and list it as an asset and say to their knowledge it has no value because they can't get their money out of the investment.
Right.
I have seen those. I didn't know, I thought they were poor investments, but they could have been part of a scam.
Well, I mean, there are small companies that scam investors who they're basically churns, where they'll go out for investment, they'll live off that investment for a while, they'll shut the company down while selling all of its assets into a new incorporation, and then they'll go out for more investment and burn through that. It's not so dissimilar in that those investors lost everything they had. Most of the time, they don't report it as a crime. Those are just assets, even in a non-traditional, non-operating company.
They don't think of it as a scam. They were just poor investments.
Right.
There are a lot of ways to pull this off. I'm so glad that you are educating people and that you're on CBS and NBC talking about it.
Debby is.
Debby, okay, you don't want to play
I'm
that.
not as photogenic.
Well, she is very.
I do it on behalf of Scars.
Okay. And she's good at it. And people listen, but raising the profile of what can happen is so important. And it may just help people resist the temptation to become involved and send money. I always tell women, never give money to a man. Just don't co-sign a loan for him. Nothing. I didn't co-sign for my child when he wanted to buy a car. So this you better work out on your own, because all I see.
Because all children are scammers.
Sort of. It's certainly my experience in my bankruptcy office that parents have been scammed by their children, their godchildren, their grandchildren. I do a lot of bankruptcies because people co-signed loans or got financially involved with other people, ostensibly to help them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my statistic values is that 60% of scam victims are being scammed by their own family members. So I'm not exactly sure I got that, but in my banking situation, I saw it in banking all the time.
Sure, I see it in my office.
And when the parents took the kids off the accounts, they had a bird, especially they have no access to the accounts. And I'm thinking, thank goodness.
Yeah.
So I think we're nearing the end point of our conversation. So maybe what you could do at this stage would be to speak to victims about how not only they can contact you, but in general, how they can find local professional bankruptcy attorneys, and how to begin the process, how to begin the conversation. How do they make an appointment? What should they expect when they come in for the initial consultation? What are you going to ask of them again? So that, because a big part of this problem is so many victims are in some stage of panic, fear,
And shame.
Grief.
their cognition, their decision making is adversely affected by the trauma.
Mhm.
Maybe if you can just sort of set the expectations, how does the process begin and go to the point where they're empowered to make a decision?
I am a fan of talk to someone. They can go to the National Association of Consumer Bankruptcy Attorneys and look for people who are members, and those are lawyers who are dedicated to bankruptcy.
Okay.
The American Board of Certification certifies lawyers as experts, and we take a day-long exam. Ugh, don't ever want to do that again. And
But the first organization that you mentioned, if you could mention it again, that would be a starting point to find them.
I think that would be a starting point to find people who are dedicated to the practice of protecting consumer bankrupts.
Okay.
National Association of Consumer Bankruptcy Attorneys, NACBA. And their website, I think, is NACBA.com or NACBA.org.
Probably done. We'll post a link associated with the recording when we discuss. So,
and
okay, they find one, and then what is the next thing they should do?
They make an appointment to talk to somebody. All those, if you've ever looked at the AVO website, people send questions to lawyers. As far as I'm concerned, that's just a waste of time. You don't get particular answers. Nobody's looking at your fact situation, and they can't give you really any guidance except go see a bankruptcy lawyer, for crying out loud.
Right.
And if I'm looking for a bankruptcy lawyer, I want you to read their reviews, because some people tell me, oh, I'm so surprised that you're not judging me. Why on earth would I judge you? How many referrals am I going to get from that behavior? But there are lawyers out there who just have a more, boy, you were stupid kind of attitude about it. And you'll see that in the reviews, in their Google reviews. The lawyer will ask you to complete some kind of an intake form with your name and address, and list what your assets are. Is anybody suing you? Have you ever filed bankruptcy before? What's your income and what are your expenses? Because that helps them analyze how bankruptcy is going to work for you, what kind of bankruptcy you would be eligible for. And
recommend, as we do, that if they're the victim of a crime, they communicate that immediately and thoroughly.
Absolutely, because without facts, we don't know what we need to do to help you. And I do recommend that people report to the authorities if they've been scammed. And many of them already have, but many have not. They don't understand the importance of that. But it's like rape. Rape needs to be reported more often, even though it's a miserable experience, because we need to understand how rife it is in the community.
Right. That's the purpose for our telling people to report it. Not that you're going to get your money back, but they need to know the numbers. They've got to know the numbers. But that's
so they've come in, they've done the initial consultation. What happens next?
I tell them whether bankruptcy would work for them, or I recommend something else. And they can retain me at that time. Usually I have 2 other additional appointments. We have our clients give us, go through an intense bankruptcy questionnaire online. We run their credit reports, their asset reports, We look in the public records for judgments and things like that. But things on your credit report fall off. Bad credit on your credit report falls off after 7 years. Bankruptcy will stay on 10 years from the time of discharge of a Chapter 7. So there may be some things that you know about yourself and your financial situation that aren't on your credit report, like you borrowed money from family, or you things like that, and everything has to be reported. Even though you want to pay them back, you can pay back anybody you want to after the bankruptcy. Don't pay them back before, especially if they're family. But after the bankruptcy, you get rid of all the bad debt. And if you want to pay back the bank of mom and dad, by all means, it'll help Christmases go better and stuff.
Okay.
And
do you do any counseling after the fact or during it? And because now that you've got all this done, going forward, you want to change some of their behaviors possibly.
yes, and there are in now required since 2005, they take pre-bankruptcy credit counseling. That's not from me, it's from an outside agency. And after they file the bankruptcy, they have to take post-bankruptcy debtor education. And I'm throughout the process of working with them, we probably in my office, in my practice, spend 6 hours face-to-face.
Okay.
Talking about their money problems. And I do a fair amount of coaching in that, to help them, admit that what they were doing doesn't work and that there's a better way, and how to rebuild their credit afterwards. And and I give them my book, which is the 12-step program applied to bankruptcy.
You can hold it up.
Yeah, show us. It's called Rise Like a Phoenix. That's how I met Kathryn.
Yeah, the 12 steps of bankruptcy.
Can you give us a bit of a timeline from the point that a person walks in and goes through your intake and then retains you? What's the timeline look like for the bankruptcy to be discharged for the two?
Okay. Most of our clients, it's, they come in, they see me maybe, and they do all their homework. Maybe it's a month, and they pay the next installment of fees at the second appointment. And I review all their stuff with them. And then maybe 2 weeks later, we have a signing appointment. Right after we sign it, we electronically file it with the court. And within a week, they get a notice telling them when and where and how their first meeting of creditors will be held. And I give them a list of the mandatory questions that they will be asked at that meeting of creditors. These days, since COVID, it's been telephonic. And, we're all on the line together, and it's recorded by the trustee. And their testimony is taken under oath. And it is a big deal to tell the truth on these forms. I like to think that I grill my clients under a bright light as we're filling out these forms, and they give me an answer, and I see it doesn't make sense with an answer over here. And I pull that information out of them because it's very, very important to tell the truth on your schedules. And after the meeting of creditors, there's a 60-day window that petitions to stop their discharge of a particular debt or of all their debts can be filed, just 60 days. If the trustee finds out that you lied somewhere on your schedules, they will ask for that 60 days to be extended so that they can do more discovery.
Okay.
Do they actually send something out to your creditors saying this person's gone into bankruptcy? Do you want to file?
Yes, they do.
They do.
There is the notice goes out within a week after the bankruptcy is filed. And all the creditors are invited to attend the meeting of creditors, otherwise known as a 341 meeting. Very rarely do they show up, but if you as a debtor piss somebody off personally, like someone was suing you and they want your money and they think you're a liar and a cheat, no, the IRS never shows up.
Oh, okay.
And in 35 years, I've never had the IRS show up. I've had the United States Trustee's Office come in and ask questions for the federal government. And I've had the U.S. attorneys come in and ask questions for the federal government, like SBA loans, or USDA mortgages. But if they're really interested, they'll ask the court to set a deposition and go in depth in private, rather than in front of all the other debtors that day.
But showing up, can they still be part of the debt of the creditors if they don't show up?
Sure.
Okay,
Sure.
so
All they have to do, they file a notice of appearance with the court, and they still get copies of everything that happens.
Okay.
You know, they get copies of the trustee will put out assets have been recovered, file claims. They're receiving mail all through your process.
Okay.
And they receive a copy of the discharge if you get it.
So I think we've reached a logical conclusion. What I'd like, Kathryn, is for those who are in the state of Florida and interested in contacting you, how can they reach you?
My website is hathawaylaw.net.
Okay.
And make sure you get the .net part.
Yep.
And the our number is 850-425-4700. I
Okay.
only practice in the Northern District of Florida, which is from Pensacola to Gainesville. I decided it's just easier to deal with just one court, one set of judges and trustees.
Okay.
And I can do a better job for my clients because I know the judges and the trustees.
Right.
But you can refer. I mean, you have.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. And as I said, if you're looking for a lawyer someplace else, National Association of Consumer Bankruptcy Attorneys, or the American Bankruptcy Institute that I'm a member of.
Okay.
And that's the sister organization of the one that does the certifications.
All right. Excellent. Any final thoughts, Debbie?
No, I so appreciate you coming on today and giving us this information. And for me, the takeaway is own it, be honest about it, seek some professional assistance, and then release it. Just let it go. But thank you so much for all that you do. And I'm going to have you on my show.
Well, thank you so much for letting me join you. And I learned so much. I know that I will be able to be a better help to my clients because of what I've learned here today. So
Well,
thank you.
perhaps you can add to your ad bankruptcy for financial fraud victims, because a lot of them in the state of Florida alone, hundreds of thousands.
I will certainly do that. I can do an extra page on my website about financial fraud victims.
Well, if you'd like, we would be happy to supply you with the basic information for that.
That would be great. I would love to have that.
Happy to do that for you.
Yes, I have room for more pages on my website. And
Good.
this is an important one.
Well,
thank you for the service you do.
Thank you. We are the world's largest publisher on the topic, and just one of our websites that has thousands of articles reaches about 1 million people a year.
That's wonderful. A great service.
Thank you. So thank you, Kathryn Hathaway, for joining us today and taking time out of your schedule to help us better educate scam victims on this topic. It's been tremendously helpful for us.
My pleasure and my purpose.
Great. So again, my name is Dr. Tim McGuinness. I'm a director of the Society of Citizens Against Relationship Scams, Inc., a government-registered crime victims assistance and crime prevention nonprofit organization providing support for scam victims worldwide. The recording of this conversation will be copyright 2022 SCARS. You can reach us through our websites, romancescamsnow.com, or our corporate website, which is againstscams.org. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Debbie.
My pleasure, Tim. Thank you, Kathryn.
Again, thank you, Kathryn.
Thank you all. Thank you. Have a great day.
All right.